My name is Edward. I'm 72 years old, and the night my son Daniel turned 40, something inside me broke. Not with a crash, but with the quiet, steady snap of something that had been pulled too tight for too long. It was supposed to be a celebration. Amanda, Daniel's wife, had prepared a grand dinner. The dining table was full. Friends, family, co-workers. Candles flickered, jazz played low in the background, and the scent of rosemary and garlic filled the room. I had taken extra care that evening, ironed my best shirt, polished my shoes, even wrapped a small gift for Daniel. A silver pocket watch, with a simple engraving, "I'm always with you." I sat at the far end of the table. Not at the head, like I used to, back when the house was full of life and I was the one hosting dinners. Now I was a guest. No, not even that. I was background noise. No one asked how I was doing. Amanda didn't make eye contact. The grandchildren were too busy on their tablets to notice I was there. I tried to smile, to fit in, to laugh when others did. But it all felt forced. Like I was clinging to a memory everyone else had agreed to forget. When Daniel finally stood to make his birthday speech, I felt something tighten in my chest. He tapped his glass with a spoon. The room quieted. Everyone turned to him. He smiled, cleared his throat, and began. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It means a lot to celebrate with the people who matter most." He looked around the table. Eyes sparkled, heads nodded. "Family," he said. "Real family. The ones who support you, who know when it's time for a new chapter." Then his eyes locked onto mine. His smile didn't fade. "Dad," he said, his voice calm and steady, "you're no longer part of this family." The words hung in the air like a blade. No one gasped. No one objected. Amanda simply looked down at her plate. The children kept scrolling. I didn't ask why. I didn't plead. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a brown folder, and slid it across the table toward him. "Goodbye," I said. Then I stood up, tucked in my chair, and walked out. Nobody stopped me. But if you think that was the beginning of the end, you'd be wrong. That moment at dinner? That was just the final cut. The wound had been bleeding for years. Let me take you back to when it all started. Back to the house I built, the son I raised, and the silence that grew louder with every passing year. The house wasn't just four walls and a roof to me, it was everything. I laid each brick myself when I was in my early 30s, back when my hands were stronger and my back could carry the weight of dreams. Every corner of that house carried a story. I remembered where Daniel took his first steps, where my late wife painted sunflowers on the kitchen wall, and where the family once sat around the fireplace telling stories deep into the night. After my wife passed away, it was just me and Daniel. I raised him the best I could. Worked double shifts. Missed sleep. Missed meals. Missed life. Also, he could have one. He was a good kid, smart, kind, always asking questions. He had big plans. College. Career. Marriage. I supported it all. When Daniel got married to Amanda, I was genuinely happy for him. They were young, optimistic, full of plans. Their first apartment was small and noisy, and when Amanda got pregnant with their first child, they asked to move into my house, just for a while. I said yes. Of course I said yes. It was my son. I emptied out the guest bedroom, painted the walls pale blue, and bought new curtains. Amanda's cravings were unpredictable, so I stocked the fridge with everything from pickles to cheesecake. I drove them to doctor appointments, built a crib with my own hands, and hung tiny stars from the nursery ceiling. I was proud. But, just for a while, became 6 months. Then a year. Then 2. They stopped talking about moving out. Stopped mentioning the apartment. At first, I didn't mind. The house felt full again, with life, with noise, with laughter. But slowly, the feeling shifted. It started with little things. Amanda wanted more privacy, so she asked me not to enter certain rooms. Then they turned the second living room into their family room. I wasn't invited in. My photos started disappearing from the shelves. A frame of my wife and me at Niagara Falls vanished one day, replaced by a smiling shot of Daniel and Amanda in front of a hotel pool. I didn't say anything. I told myself they needed space, that it was normal. But it wasn't. One morning I came downstairs to find a new label on the kitchen cabinet that used to hold my tea, kids' snacks. My teacups were boxed up and moved to the basement. Even the thermostat was suddenly locked. Amanda said the kids had allergies and the temperature needed to stay constant. I started wearing sweaters in July. But I stayed silent. What would be the point of complaining in my own home? It was no longer my home. It was theirs. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a guest. One that had overstayed his welcome. But it took me too long to realize it. At some point, they stopped knocking. My room had once been Daniel's childhood playroom. Small, windowless, barely enough for a single bed and a narrow dresser. They moved me there after Amanda's second pregnancy, saying they needed the bigger guest room for the new baby's nursery. "We're tight on space, Dad," Daniel had said, shrugging. "You understand." I nodded. Of course I did. But that room, it didn't even have a door. Just a curtain they nailed to the frame, like I was a roommate in some shared college apartment. Still, I tried to make it mine. I brought in a lamp from the garage, hung up one of my old fishing hats on the wall, even set up a small radio to listen to baseball games at night. But nothing could drown out the sound of how unwanted I'd become. One night, I overheard Amanda on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping, I was walking to the kitchen, quietly, barefoot, and I heard her say, "Yeah, he's still here. It's like he just won't take a hint." Then silence. Then laughter. And Daniel's voice joined in. That laugh gutted me more than the words. A few weeks later, I was told not to use the front bathroom anymore. "The kids are getting older," Amanda said. "They need privacy." Then the living room TV remote disappeared. When I asked, Amanda said, "We're just trying to keep screen time down." So I stopped watching TV. Stopped eating dinner with them, too. I would wait until they'd all gone to bed, then tiptoe into the kitchen to make myself a sandwich. I remember once opening the fridge and seeing a sticky note on the orange juice that said, "For family use." I stood there holding the door open, the cool air on my face, and just stared at it for minutes. I didn't cry. I don't cry easily. But something clenched in my chest so tight I had to sit down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went out to the garage, sat in the old recliner I kept there, and looked around at the rusted tools, the faded paint cans, the spiderwebs in the corners. It felt more like home than the house itself. And that's when the idea first came. Not revenge. Not escape. Just distance. Maybe I didn't belong here anymore. Maybe it was time to stop fighting for a place at a table that didn't have a chair for me. But I wasn't ready yet. Not quite. The morning it all changed was unremarkable. No big argument. No shouting. Just Amanda walking past me in the hallway without a word, holding a laundry basket, humming some pop song. I stood there, holding my coffee, and it hit me. I didn't belong in this house anymore. Not because they told me, but because the silence had swallowed me whole. That day, I went to the bank. I had some savings. Not much, a modest pension, a bit of Social Security, and a few thousand I'd been tucking away for years in a private account. I had planned to give it to Daniel's kids one day. For college. For weddings. For life. But life had its own plans. I spoke to a kind woman named Teresa. She must have sensed something, because she didn't ask many questions. Just helped me transfer what I had into a separate account, completely under my name. No joint access. No connections to Daniel. Next, I called a real estate agent. I asked if she could help me find a small place, something quiet, outside the city. I wasn't picky. I just wanted a front porch. Somewhere I could sit in the evenings and listen to the wind. She said she'd get back to me. By the end of the week, I had found a little cottage 40 miles north. Worn down, sure, but sturdy. with a little garden out back and 2 rocking chairs on the porch. I fell in love instantly. I didn't tell Daniel. Didn't mention a word to Amanda. I kept waking up each morning, doing the same chores, pretending to look tired, invisible. Meanwhile, I was quietly preparing to disappear. I started moving some of my things into storage. Old tools, photo albums, my wife's records. I told Amanda I was cleaning out junk, and she didn't even look up from her phone. It was so easy to be overlooked now. I could have walked out the door with a suitcase and no one would have noticed. That part stung. More than I cared to admit. But there was one last thing I had to do before I left. One last gesture, not out of anger, but out of finality. I went to my lawyer, a man named Clifton I'd trusted for 30 years. We updated my will. We removed Daniel and Amanda as beneficiaries. I left everything to charity, and to a former neighbor who used to bring me soup every Sunday. She checked on me when I had the flu, I told Clifton. She treated me like a person. He understood. Finally, I drafted a short letter. Just a single page. Folded it. Slipped it inside a brown folder. Along with copies of the will, the house deed transfer, and a photo. One of Daniel and me fishing when he was 10, before the world got so cold. Then I waited. I waited for the right moment to deliver that folder. And it came on Daniel's birthday. The day of Daniel's birthday arrived with sunshine and the smell of roast drifting through the vents. Amanda was in full hostess mode, yelling at the kids, checking the oven, shouting at the delivery guy about the late wine order. She barely noticed me slip out that morning. I didn't go far. Just took a walk around the block. The neighborhood had changed. New fences, fancier cars, younger families. I used to know everyone on this street. Now I was just the quiet old man no one waved to. When I got back, the driveway was already full. Daniel's friends were arriving. I recognized a few from his office parties. Big handshakes, tight smiles, voices a little too loud. Amanda had set up decorations, candles, 3 different kinds of cake. She was always good at appearances. I sat at the far end of the table, by the sliding glass door. The seat where the breeze could reach me. No one said a word to me beyond a polite, hi. Not even Daniel. He was busy laughing, clinking glasses, retelling stories I barely recognized, stories from his life where I no longer featured. I watched him smile and thought, I don't know this man. The food was rich. Too rich for my stomach. I barely touched it. I held a glass of wine I didn't sip and fingered the folder in my jacket pocket, waiting, listening, watching. Finally, the room grew quiet. Daniel stood, spoon tapping against his wineglass. The old birthday tradition. Thank you all for coming tonight, he began, grinning. 40 years. That's a big one. Cheers, nods, more grins. I'm grateful to be surrounded by the people who matter most. People who've supported me, challenged me, stood by me through the hardest years. I braced myself. And sometimes in life, you have to let go of what no longer fits. You grow up. You move forward. You make space for your own family. He turned his gaze to me. Dad, he said, you're no longer part of this family. No one gasped. No one laughed, either. Just silence. Heavy, hard silence. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the brown folder, and slid it across the table. It landed right in front of his birthday cake. This is yours, I said. My voice didn't shake. Then I stood up, looked around the room, and nodded once. Not one face met mine. Not Amanda's. Not my grandchildren's. Not even Daniel's. I walked out through the sliding door, into the backyard, and then through the gate. The wind was cold. I didn't have a coat. But I had peace. For the first time in years. The air outside bit at my skin, but I didn't feel it. I walked down the sidewalk in my pressed shirt and old shoes, no coat, no bag, no rush. The neighborhood looked the same as always. trimmed lawns, porch lights glowing like tiny lighthouses. But everything inside me had changed. At the corner, I stopped. Looked back once. The house stood still, silent. No one came running after me. Not Daniel. Not Amanda. Not even the kids. That was when it hit me. I didn't live there anymore. By the time I reached the station, the sky had turned purple. I sat on a bench with a paper bag in my lap. Inside, my wallet, a bus ticket, and a key to the cottage. I had already packed up what little I needed, a suitcase of clothes, my fishing gear, and 2 framed photographs, one of my wife and one of Daniel as a boy, sitting on my shoulders. I don't know why I kept that last one. Maybe to remember that he hadn't always looked through me. The ride took 2 hours. The further we got from the city, the more I exhaled. No more whispers behind doors. No more locked thermostats or post-it notes telling me what not to touch. When I arrived at the cottage, it was dark. I unlocked the front door, turned on the lights, and stood in the middle of the empty living room. The silence was sharp. Not empty, but clean. Like a canvas waiting for new paint. Over the next few days, I unpacked. Slowly. Intentionally. I hung the fishing photo in the hallway, not out of sentiment, but because I'd earned every wrinkle on that boy's face. Neighbors stopped by. One brought a pie. Another offered tools. They didn't ask questions. They just said, "Welcome." It stunned me how easy it was to feel human again. But Daniel's words still echoed in my head. "Dad, you're no longer part of this family." At first, they played like a loop. A wound being picked open again and again. But the more time passed, the more they became quiet. Not gone, but dull. Bearable. Then, one morning, I got a letter. No return address. Handwritten. From Daniel. Inside, 2 sentences. "I don't know why you left like that. But it felt cruel." No apology. No question. Just accusation. I stared at the paper for a long time. Thought about replying. Thought about calling. But then I remembered all the moments he'd made me feel like a burden. Like a tenant in my own life. And I folded the letter back into the envelope and slid it into the fireplace. Sometimes, silence is the only way to be heard. I didn't expect to make friends at 72. I figured I'd live quietly. Read the newspaper. Grow tomatoes. Maybe join a church group if I ever felt lonely enough. But the town had different plans for me. The first to show up was June, my next-door neighbor. Widow, 78, drove an old Ford with peeling paint and a trunk full of garden tools. She knocked on my door one morning with a casserole dish and said, "You look like someone who needs to be fed." I didn't argue. She came back the next day with banana bread. Then again with soup. Then again just to sit on the porch. We didn't talk about our pasts. We talked about weather, books, squirrels, the best brand of coffee. Nothing heavy. Just warm. Then came Michael, a retired plumber with a limp and a foul mouth, but a good heart. He needed help painting his fence. I said yes before I even thought about it. We spent 4 hours outside, painting in silence, trading a few grunts. By the end, he patted my back and said, "You're all right, Ed." Ed. Not Edward. Not Sir. Just Ed. That name hadn't been used since my wife died. I started visiting the local library. Not for books, but for peace. The librarian, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, showed me the history room. Old town photos. Newspaper clippings. She said, "Nobody really reads these anymore." I sat for hours, just flipping through stories of other lives, other mistakes, other people who were loved and forgotten. And I felt something strange. A sense of place. I planted herbs on my windowsill. Bought a rocking chair for the porch. Strung up wind chimes even though I never liked them. Now their soft clinks filled the space where TV used to be. I wrote letters I never sent. To Daniel. To my wife. To myself. I folded them neatly, placed them in a box under my bed. Not because I wanted them found, but because I needed to say things without being interrupted. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned soft orange, I sat on the porch with June. We were drinking tea. She looked over at me and said, "You look like a man who survived something." I laughed. "I suppose I have. But you don't carry it like a wound," she added. "You carry it like a scar. That's different." I didn't say anything. Just nodded. Because she was right. The scar was there. Daniel's words. The silence. The folder on the birthday table. It was all stitched into me now. But I wasn't bleeding anymore. It was late September when he showed up. The air had just started to turn crisp, and the leaves on the maple out front had gone from green to a fiery, impatient red. I was sitting on the porch, a blanket across my knees, a mug of black coffee in my hands. The morning had been quiet, peaceful, until the sound of tires crunching over gravel pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up. A black SUV. Shiny. Too new for this street. And then the door opened. Daniel. For a second, I didn't move. My first instinct was that I was imagining it. That maybe the sunlight had tricked my eyes. But then he stepped closer, hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. Not tired. Just heavier. "Hi, Dad," he said. Dad. That word hit me in the ribs. Not because I hadn't heard it in a while, but because I didn't know if I wanted to hear it again. "Daniel," I replied. Nothing more. He stood at the foot of the porch stairs, looking up like he wasn't sure if he had permission to climb. I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. We just stood in the silence together, like two men on opposite sides of something invisible and wide. "I got your address from the lawyer," he said. "Clifton." I nodded. "I needed to see you," he added. I didn't answer. He sighed, looking down at his shoes. "Expensive leather. The kind that doesn't bend when you walk." "We had your birthday dinner," he said. "The kids missed you." I almost laughed. Almost. "Did they?" I asked, voice low. He didn't respond. "I found the folder," he continued. "The papers. The photo." I didn't move. I could feel the coffee in my hand getting colder by the second. "Why'd you leave like that?" he asked. "Why not talk to me?" Talk. Now he wanted to talk? I looked him in the eyes. Really looked. And for a moment, I saw the boy I'd carried on my shoulders. The boy who cried when his goldfish died. The boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. But that boy was gone. What would I have said? I asked finally. That I was tired of being invisible? That I no longer recognized my own house? My own son? He flinched, just slightly. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way," he said quietly. "But you did," I replied. Silence again. Thick and unmoving. He looked up at the porch. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. Not out of cruelty, but out of memory. "I'm not sure there's anything in there for you," I said. "Not yet." He nodded. Took a step back. "I get it." He turned to go, but before he reached the car, I called out. "Daniel." He turned. "You didn't lose me because of the will. Or the house. Or a dinner speech. Then why?" "You lost me," I said, "because one day you stopped seeing me as a father. And I never stopped seeing you as a son." He stood there for a moment, frozen. Then he got in the car. Drove off. I watched until the SUV disappeared past the bend. I didn't cry. But my hands shook long after the coffee went cold. That night, after Daniel's visit, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the wooden ceiling of the cottage, the moonlight sliding gently through the curtains. The house was so quiet, you could hear the wind whispering through the trees, brushing the side of the walls like someone pacing outside. My hands ached, not from cold, but from memory. I got up and went to the desk by the window. Opened the bottom drawer. pulled out the little stack of letters I'd been writing for months. They weren't organized. Some were on torn notebook paper, others on proper stationery. All of them were dated. None of them were sealed. The first one I opened was addressed to Daniel, written just days after I'd moved in. I don't know how to hate you. I keep trying, but it turns into disappointment. Not because of what you said at the table. That was just the surface. It's the years before that. The silence. The small humiliations. The fact that I raised you with warmth, and you returned it with temperature control and locked cupboards. Still, I loved you. I still do. And I wish I didn't. I folded it carefully, put it aside. The next one was to Amanda. You were never cruel in words, only in absence. You made the walls close in, one passive decision at a time. You never yelled at me. You never insulted me. You just erased me, slowly, like I was a chalk drawing on your living room floor. Then I found one I'd written to my wife. I had only ever written her one. Maggie, I tried. I really tried. I raised him the way we promised. I gave him everything I had. But somewhere along the way, he stopped needing me. I stayed too long in a house that didn't love me. I miss your voice. I miss your laugh. I hope you'd be proud of the way I left. Quiet, but with my dignity. That one made my throat burn. I sat there for hours, rereading, sometimes whispering the words aloud like prayer. It was strange, how much strength I'd stored in silence. How loud the truth sounded when it was finally given a page. I never intended to send these letters. They were for me. For the version of me that had stayed quiet too long. For the man who smiled politely while being erased. By dawn, I lit the fireplace. One by one, I fed the letters into the flame. Not out of anger. Not to destroy them. But to let them go. As the ashes curled upward and dissolved into the chimney, I felt a strange peace settle into my chest. The past didn't own me anymore. Neither did my son. And for the first time, I realized something I hadn't dared admit before. Forgiveness isn't something you give to make the other person feel better. It's something you choose to stop bleeding. His phone rang just after noon. I was in the garden, kneeling near the rosemary bush, digging my fingers into the soil, letting it crumble under my nails. Dirt was good. It didn't lie. It didn't pretend. You gave it attention, and it gave something back. The ringing pulled me out of my thoughts. I wiped my hands on an old cloth and stepped inside, heart already thudding with that strange rhythm you only feel when something's about to change. The screen said, "Unknown number." I almost didn't answer. I almost let it fade into voicemail, into nothing. But some part of me, that same stubborn part that had carried Daniel on my shoulders and stayed silent through years of slow rejection, picked up the phone. "Hello." A pause. Then a small voice. "Grandpa." I stood still. It was Emma, Daniel's oldest. 16 now, maybe 17. I hadn't seen her since the day I left. Her hair had been in a braid. She was texting during the entire birthday dinner. "Hi," I said, cautiously. "Emma." "Yeah. It's me. Mom doesn't know I'm calling." I leaned against the counter. My legs felt weak, like the weight of everything was suddenly too much. "I found your number in the folder," she continued. "The one Dad hid in the filing cabinet. I guess he didn't want anyone seeing it." Of course he didn't. I just wanted to say. Her voice cracked a little. "I'm sorry." My eyes closed slowly. "You didn't do anything," I said. "I did," she whispered. "We all did. We treated you like a ghost. And after you left, it got worse. The house got cold. Everyone stopped talking. Dad just shut down." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't prepared for this, for the voice of someone who had watched me fade and somehow still remembered the color of my presence. "I miss your pancakes," she said, trying to sound light. "And the old baseball games you used to play in the garage." I smiled. Just a little. I miss you too, Emma. There was a pause. Then a soft question. Can I come visit? The world seemed to freeze around me. The wind outside quieted. Even the birds stopped chirping. I don't know if that's a good idea, I said carefully. Not yet. Things still need space. She understood. I could hear it in her breath. But before she hung up, she said something I hadn't expected. You're still my family. No matter what they say. Then the line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, heart thudding. And for the first time since I'd left Daniel's house, something stirred in me, not hope, exactly, but a flicker of warmth. Like maybe, just maybe, something wasn't broken, just waiting to be rebuilt. But I wasn't ready yet. Not for visits. Not for reconciliation. Still, that night, I set another plate at the table. Didn't use it. Didn't touch it. Just left it there. In case. The plate stayed on the table for a week. I didn't use it. Didn't move it. Every morning I passed by it, sometimes brushing my fingers along its edge. It wasn't a symbol. I wasn't waiting for Emma to appear at my doorstep with a suitcase and an apology. It was just space. A quiet kind of welcome. No promises. No pressure. June noticed it on day 4. She didn't ask. Just poured our tea and sat down, her eyes flicking toward the extra setting and then away, like she knew. That's what I liked about June. She never asked for more than someone could give. That same evening, after she left, I walked through the house. Touched the windowsills, checked the stove, straightened a frame that had tilted in the hallway. I didn't know why, but something in me felt restless. And then I found myself on the back porch, staring at the sky. The stars had started showing earlier these days. The nights crept in gently, and I let them. I used to hate the dark. Now I welcomed it. There was comfort in the hush of nightfall, like the world agreed to slow down with me. I sat in the rocking chair I'd bought second-hand. It creaked a little, but not unpleasantly. I rocked, breathed, and listened. The wind moved through the tall trees like it was telling stories of people long gone. Somewhere in that sound, I felt understood. That was when it hit me. I didn't miss the house I left. I didn't miss the birthday parties, the big screen TV, the smell of Amanda's cinnamon candles, or the hum of a full fridge. What I missed, and what I'd rebuilt, brick by invisible brick, was safety, peace, presence. I had made a home out of silence. A home where no one sighed when I entered a room. A home where I could hum without judgment. Where I could forget my slippers in the hallway without hearing about it later. Where I could laugh at old sitcom reruns and no one would roll their eyes. This was my place. The next morning, I made pancakes. Real ones. From scratch. I hadn't done that in years. Not since before Maggie passed. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and browned butter. I set a plate at each seat, including the empty one. And I ate slowly, smiling. Because for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was filling space that didn't belong to me. Later that afternoon, Michael stopped by. He brought a busted rake and 2 cups of coffee. You look like a man who's figured something out, he said, sipping loudly. Maybe, I replied, nodding toward the plate still sitting on the table. Maybe I've remembered something I forgot. He glanced at it. Said nothing. Then, this place suits you, Ed. You look right in it. And he was right. The old man they ignored in his own home? He was gone. In his place was someone new, or maybe someone rediscovered. Someone who didn't need validation to exist. I still hadn't called Daniel back. I didn't know if I ever would. But that was the thing about healing, it didn't demand answers. Just space. Just time. Just truth. And I had all 3 now. The letter arrived on a Thursday. I hadn't checked the mailbox in 3 days. Bills didn't excite me. Catalogs didn't interest me. I liked surprises, but life at my age rarely offered them. Yet there it was, a small, cream-colored envelope, tucked between a gardening ad and a local real estate flyer. No return address. Neat handwriting. Feminine, maybe. Precise. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Folded carefully. I sat on the porch before opening it, letting the sun warm my knees through my jeans. The world felt still. The kind of stillness that asks you to listen. Then I opened it. Dear Mr. Hayes. You don't know me, but I've heard a lot about you. My name is Caroline. I'm dating your grandson, Jacob. He talks about you. A lot. More than he thinks. More than he admits. He doesn't know I'm writing this, and I hope that's okay. But I felt like I needed to. Because sometimes when he talks about you, there's this look in his eyes, like something valuable slipped through his fingers, and he's still not sure how. He told me about the birthday. About what Daniel said. He didn't give details, but I could read between the lines. He regrets not speaking up. He says it felt like being trapped between love and fear, and he chose fear. I'm not writing to excuse anything. You don't need that. But I thought you should know, you're not forgotten. Not dismissed. You still matter. Even to those who never said it out loud. Jacob keeps an old photo of you in his wallet. You're holding him at a baseball game. He thinks I haven't noticed. But I have. I hope this letter doesn't upset you. Sometimes people need to hear things from outside their echo chamber. I just wanted to thank you for being the kind of person that someone I love still misses every day. Warmly, Caroline. I read it twice. Then a third time. There were no tears. No dramatic clutching of the chest. Just quiet. A kind of ache that didn't sting. It just sat with me. Like an old friend who came to visit, not to stay, just to remind me I wasn't alone. I hadn't thought of Jacob in months. He was always the quiet one. Thoughtful. A bit too serious for a boy his age. He used to help me fix the mailbox every summer, even when it didn't need fixing. I wondered what he looked like now. Older, obviously. Maybe taller than Daniel. Maybe not. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I didn't write to Daniel. Not to Amanda. I wrote to Caroline. Just a few lines. Thank you for your letter. Tell Jacob the next time he wants to fix something, my porch steps could use a hand. There'll be pancakes waiting. I didn't seal it right away. Just left it open on the desk, the ink still drying. There were cracks in the glass now. In the frozen silence. And sometimes, even the smallest letter can let the light back in. It was early October when I saw him. I had just come in from raking the yard. The wind had picked up, tossing orange and yellow leaves like confetti across the steps. The air smelled like wood smoke and pine, the kind of smell that settles into your sweater and stays for hours. I had poured myself a cup of coffee, ready to warm my hands and sit a while, when I heard it. Soft footsteps on gravel. I opened the front door and froze. There he was. Jacob. Standing at the bottom of my porch, hands stuffed deep in the pockets of his hoodie. Taller than I remembered. Broader in the shoulders. His hair was longer now, a little messy. But his eyes, those were still the same. Wide, thoughtful, unsure. "Hi, Grandpa," he said. It hit me like a wave. That voice. That word. I didn't rush down. I didn't cry out. I just stood there, letting the moment breathe. "Jacob," I said. "You came." He gave a small, sheepish smile. "Caroline said you might be okay with that." I nodded, stepping aside. "Come on up." I was just about to burn my tongue on some very average coffee. He chuckled and climbed the stairs. He didn't bring a bag. Didn't look like he planned to stay long. But there was weight in his presence. Like this wasn't just a drop-in visit. It meant something. We sat on the porch, each with a mug in hand. For a while, we didn't say anything. Just watched the trees sway and the sky fade to soft gray. Then, Quietly, he said. I wanted to come sooner. I looked over at him. So why now? He stared into his cup. Because I'm not a kid anymore. And I got tired of pretending I didn't miss you. I didn't respond. Let him sit in that truth. I didn't know what to do back then, he continued. When Dad said those things, when he made you leave, I froze. I was scared. And I hated myself for it. You were a child, Jacob, I said softly. You weren't supposed to fix what grown men broke. He shook his head. But I saw it. All of it. How they talked over you. How they decided things without you. How they treated you like a burden. And I just went along. There it was. The guilt. The thing no one talks about in families. I reached over and tapped his hand once. It's not about what you did then. It's about what you're doing now. He looked up. You're here, I said. That's enough. We sat in silence again. The wind moved through the trees like it was listening. After a while he said, I still have that photo. From the ball game. I smiled. You spilled ketchup on my shirt that day. He laughed. I was 5. You had a better arm than your dad ever did. We both smiled. It was a soft moment, not forced. He stayed for an hour. Helped me move some firewood. Sat in Maggie's old rocking chair. Ate 2 slices of apple pie without asking what was in them. When he finally stood to leave, he looked nervous. Can I come back next week? He asked. I didn't hesitate. I'd like that. He walked to his car, turned once, and waved. And just like that, something broken didn't feel so broken anymore. Not healed. Not erased. But opening. Jacob had come 3 Sundays in a row. No questions, no drama. Just showed up. Helped stack wood. Drank terrible coffee. Listened to old jazz records he claimed to not hate. Sometimes we sat in silence. Sometimes we talked about nonsense. Weather. Football. Books he'd never read, and I pretended I still could see well enough to. It was simple. Uncomplicated. And for a man like me, after a lifetime of navigating family tension like a minefield, it felt like sunlight after weeks of gray. Then, on the 4th Sunday, he brought a letter. Not handwritten. Printed. Folded once, neatly. He handed it to me without speaking, then sat down across from me on the porch, watching carefully. I unfolded it slowly. An invitation. To Thanksgiving dinner. At Daniel's house. My fingers tightened just slightly at the sight of his name. Dad wants you to come, Jacob said quietly. I kept my eyes on the page. The date. The time. The address that used to be mine. The place where my slippers had once rested by the fireplace. Where I used to sit at the head of the table. Did he write this? I asked. Jacob hesitated. He signed it. Caroline helped him put it together. Of course she did. I placed the letter on the armrest beside me and took a slow breath. The porch creaked beneath us. A bird fluttered in the tree above like even it was listening. I'm not ready, I said. Jacob nodded. He didn't push. Didn't beg. Just waited. I don't want to sit at that table like nothing happened, I continued. Like I wasn't shoved out of my own life. I know, he said. I wouldn't either. I looked at him. Then why bring this? He shrugged. Because it's a start. And because I think he's starting to realize what he broke. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I wanted to believe that? That I didn't trust him? That part of me wanted to go just to see the look on Daniel's face. To remind him that I still stood tall, that I still had dignity, that I wasn't the ghost he'd hoped would vanish quietly? Instead, I asked, will you be there? Yeah, he said. But only if you are. That made me smile. Later that night, I stared at the invitation again. Not with bitterness. Just caution. I wasn't the same man who left that house. And that house, I imagined, wasn't the same either. I wrote a note. Folded it once. Gave it to Jacob the next morning when he stopped by on his way to class. It read, "I'll come. But I won't sit at the head. I'll sit where there's peace. If there isn't any, I'll leave." He didn't say anything after reading it. Just nodded, slipped it into his backpack, and patted my shoulder as he walked off. And that afternoon, I stood by the window and whispered to Maggie's old photo, "I'm not going back for them. I'm going back for me." Because sometimes, even a man betrayed deserves to walk through the door again, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as the man who finally chose himself. Thanksgiving morning came cold and still. I woke before the sun, made coffee, and watched the sky turn from ash to gold. My hands were steady, but my chest carried weight. Not fear. Not exactly. Something heavier, like walking into the final chapter of a book you didn't want to reread. I dressed simply. Blue shirt. Dark jacket. The same boots I wore the day I left Daniel's house. A silent reminder that I had walked out strong, and now returned on my own terms. Jacob arrived at 9, punctual as ever. He didn't speak much on the drive. Just turned on soft music, let the hum of the tires fill the space between us. When we pulled into the driveway, I felt it, the air, thick with memory. The porch I'd built. The window I'd fixed after a storm. Even the hedge I used to trim with obsessive precision still leaned just slightly to the right. Daniel stood in the doorway. He looked older. Tired. A man who had learned things the hard way. But I wasn't here for his guilt. I was here for me. "Dad," he said softly, stepping forward. I gave him a nod. No warmth, but no bitterness either. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and roasted turkey. Familiar and foreign. Amanda was in the kitchen. She turned, startled, then smiled, a small, unsure smile. I nodded to her, too. There were others, neighbors, Caroline, a few faces I didn't know. I kept to myself. Let them talk. Let them stare. Let them wonder. The dining room looked almost identical. Same long table. Same overhead light that flickered slightly when the dishwasher ran. And at the head of the table, an empty chair. I paused. Everyone looked toward me, expecting me to take it. The unspoken signal. The gesture of honor. Or was it pity? But I didn't. I walked past the head, around the table, and chose a seat halfway down, next to Jacob. A silence settled. Then someone cleared their throat. Dishes were passed. Conversations resumed, awkwardly at first, then more naturally. I didn't say much. Didn't need to. Until dessert. Daniel stood. He began, eyes scanning the table. "I know this isn't easy. And I know I've done things I can't undo." He looked at me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said. "Just, thank you. For coming." I nodded once. Nothing more. After pie, I stood and walked to the back window. The garden was still there. Overgrown. Wild. But alive. Jacob came to stand beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I looked at him. At his steady eyes. His quiet strength. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." When it was time to leave, I didn't wait for a long goodbye. Just shook a few hands, thanked Amanda for the pie, and walked out with Jacob. But just before I reached the door, I paused, turned back, and laid a folded note on the head chair's plate. Inside it, only 6 words. "This is not my seat anymore." We drove home in silence. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was full. Full of the quiet knowing that I had come back not to reclaim something, but to release it. Because sometimes, the final act of dignity isn't returning to what hurt you. It's walking away from it, standing tall, and never needing to explain why. Thank you for spending this time with us. If the story moved you, even a little, let us know. Drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Your support means more than you know.